So the house is that you're interested in on the market, asking 310,000. You offer 300,000, and so you make an offer contract. You date it. You give all the right information. You say what your offer is. You give a deposit to show that you're in earnest, that you're serious about this. But then you list your contingencies. Say, hey, look, I want to buy this house unless it doesn't pass inspection, unless I'm not able to get financing, unless I'm not able to get insurance, unless the title is somehow not clear. But if all of this does happen in a favorable way, then we're going to close 2 months in the future. Now, the seller has 3 options. They could accept your offer. They could say, okay, I agree to this offer contract, and then y'all will both sign it. So this is, you could put your signature, and the seller would put their signature, and so everyone agrees to this happening, and your deposit will essentially be taken, and we'll talk in a second about where that deposit goes. Another option is that the seller might just outright reject your offer. It says, no, this is an insult. This house has been in our family for forever. The 310,000 is my bargain basement price. I don't even want to give credit to this offer by even doing anything else. So they just reject it outright. And then the third option is that they could give a counter offer. They say, okay, this is close, but I'm going to issue a new counter offer contract where instead of it being 300,000, and now it's the seller we're talking about, they'll say, how about 305,000? Or how about fewer contingencies? Or how about a closing date that is closer to the period we're talking about? Or how about the buyer takes on more of some type of closing costs or some other type of thing that's actually going on. So the seller's trying to give a counteroffer that's in some way more favorable to the seller, and then the buyer might look at that and either turn it down or take it, on and on and on and on. But let's just say, for the sake of this video, that this offer contract is accepted. So if the offer contract is accepted, then the buyer signs it, the seller signs it, and they move forward. The transaction will move forward. And this essentially releases a whole series of things that are going to go on. So let me see if I can diagram that out. So we are talking about a world where the offer is accepted. And so the first thing that is going to happen is that you have an opening of escrow. Opening of escrow. Opening of escrow. And I know what you're thinking. What is escrow? And I know you're thinking that because I remember the first time that I was involved in a real estate transaction, and I thought that myself. This word escrow kept popping up over and over again, and I had never seen the word until I started having to deal with this real estate transaction. And the whole idea of escrow, let me scroll this up a little bit, is if you have a buyer and a seller, and escrow actually applies beyond to just real estate, but the idea becomes useful anytime you're making a major transaction for something that's quite valuable. Maybe the transaction is a little bit involved. So if you have a buyer and a seller, you might just say, the buyer might say, hey, give me the keys to the house. Give me the keys. Give me the keys, and then I will give you the money. Then I will give you the money. But the seller might say, hey, I'm not going to give you the keys. And when I really say keys, I'm really meaning title to the house. That's actually the important thing. Keys, locks can be changed. But give me ownership of the house, and then I'm going to give you money. And then the seller says, hey, no, this is a major asset. This is my largest asset I have. I'm not just going to give you title until I get the money first. And then the buyer says, no, this is like all the money I have. I'm not going to give you the money until I get the title to the house, until I get ownership to the house first. And by the way, I don't want to give you the money until all of this other stuff happens, until I can inspect the house and do all of these other things. And the seller says, hey, wait, I don't want to let you get all these strangers into my house and inspect it unless I know for sure that you're going to buy it. So you can see that this could be a little bit of a log jam. They want to transact, but maybe they don't trust each other, or maybe they trust each other, but they're just afraid that maybe the one person might take the title and run, or one person might take the money and run, or they might not be serious. And so what society has developed to solve this problem, and it's not just for houses, it's for any major transaction, it can be for businesses or anything that can be fairly complex, is they turn to a third party, a trusted third party. So let me write this down. A trusted third party that is called the escrow agent. So this right over here is the escrow agent. Escrow escrow agent. And when we're talking about escrow, we're talking about putting something into, I guess you could say, a third-party bucket, an account, and everything is going to be placed there. The buyer is going to put all the things that they need to place there. The seller is going to place everything that they place there, and then this trusted third party can verify that both parties have met their obligations, and then it can give the seller what the seller needs and give the buyer what the buyer needs, and then essentially close that escrow account. So right when you start this, when we say opening of the escrow account, that means that, so let's say this. So this is the escrow agent, and they're essentially going to manage the escrow account. Escrow account. So as soon as the offer is accepted, you open an escrow account. And that deposit that we talked about, that goes into the escrow account. So let's put that in. So that deposit, that $9,000 that was in the offer contract, that goes into the escrow account. Why is it important to get put in the escrow account? Well, if you gave that deposit to the seller, well, maybe the seller just cashes the check, but then later refuses to proceed or doesn't allow the inspector to come into the house or whatever else it might be. And so this is a way the buyer can feel sure that, okay, I'm writing this check, but it's just not going to disappear without me knowing about it. $9,000 is not a small amount of money. And this way the seller feels good. Okay, I trust this third party. The buyer has in earnest put the deposit there. I know the deposit is there, so now I can let the transaction proceed. I can let inspectors come into the house, feel good about it, et cetera, et cetera. And so as we go through this period, between the time that the offer was made, this 2-month period, and it's not always 2 months, and the closing date, and the closing really is the closing of the escrow account once all of the parties have met their obligations. But in that 2-month period, all the stuff is going to happen. And so you're going to have the inspection. So house passes inspection. The house passes inspection. The financing comes through, and the rest of the money for the house gets placed here. So financing, and so the financing, so if they say this person is putting 20%, so this was the $9K deposit. Actually, let me put some details here. So there's the $9K deposit. Now, in order to actually have the transaction, we have to have a whole $300,000 in there. And so let's say this buyer is going to put 20% down on the $300,000 house. So that's going to be $60,000. They've already put $9K. This deposit is usually towards the down payment. And so they'll want to put another $51K down payment. $51K down payment. And then the financing comes through. So this is going to be the remaining $240,000 from the bank. And there might be some other costs on either side. So these are kind of what you call closing costs. And we'll do a whole videos on all of the different types of closing costs. But these might be paying the agents, paying the mortgage brokers, paying for the escrow services, the title searches, et cetera, et cetera. So both sides are going to put in their closing costs. So from the buyer and the seller. And we could talk about in different states, there might be different conventions, or even different transactions might have different conventions for closing costs. And so on 12/15, so you go all the way to 12/15, and we're assuming this is happening in 2015, you have your closing date. And so the trusted third party, this escrow agent, is going to say, okay, look, the buyer has put everything that they need to put in order to buy the house. The seller has met all of their obligations, and the house has passed all the inspection. All of these contingencies have been met. So on the closing day, this trusted third party, the escrow agent, will actually disperse the money. So we'll actually disperse the $300,000 to the seller, and will actually issue the title, which is the ownership, to the buyer, and also pay everyone else who has to be paid here. They might have to pay themselves because they're one of the services as part of this, so that'll be involved in the closing costs. They might pay the mortgage broker, the agents, all of the other people who are party to this transaction. And as we've seen in the video on titles, the title is really about filing a deed. So So filing a deed with the county or with the city. So this right over here would be a deed, which essentially gives the new owner, the buyer, proof that they now own the property. So the big idea here is this whole idea of escrow is just a way for a place to collect all of the obligations of the different parties so that they can trust each other. And then on the closing date, and that's really the close of escrow, because you don't need this escrow account anymore. It disperses the different things to the different parties so that the transaction is complete.